Picture this scenario. You're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, scrolling through your banking app, and for the first time in your life, you see a number that actually makes you pause. $15,000. $15,000 sitting in your account. For a brief moment, you feel something you haven't felt in years, actual financial security. But here's what nobody tells you about hitting this milestone. This is exactly when most people completely derail their entire financial future.
And I'm going to show you why $15,000 is simultaneously the most empowering and most dangerous amount of money you can have saved up. My name is Rick, and I've spent way too much time analyzing financial psychology, studying wealth patterns, and figuring out why some people break through to real financial freedom, while others get stuck in the same place for decades. If you've ever wondered why hitting certain savings milestones feels so different, or if you're curious about what actually happens when you cross that $15,000 threshold, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up changing how you think about money.
Now, before we dive into why $15,000 is such a critical turning point, let me ask you something. What would you do if you suddenly had 15 grand sitting in your bank account right now? And be honest with yourself here, because your answer to this question reveals everything about whether you'll ever build real wealth or spend the rest of your life wondering why you can't seem to get ahead financially. Most people, when they finally scrape together $15,000, immediately start thinking about all the things they could buy with it.
Maybe they've been driving a beat-up car that's held together with duct tape and prayers, and suddenly that $15,000 feels like the perfect down payment on something nicer. Or perhaps they've been living in a cramped apartment, and that money could cover the first month's rent and security deposit on a bigger place. Some people see $15,000 and think it's finally time to take that vacation they've been putting off for years. Or maybe it's time to upgrade their entire wardrobe, or renovate their kitchen, or buy that piece of furniture they've had their eye on.
And here's the brutal truth that most financial advisors won't tell you because it doesn't make them any money. Every single one of those thoughts is your brain trying to sabotage your financial future. I'm not saying you shouldn't ever enjoy your money or that you need to live like a monk eating ramen noodles in a bare apartment. What I am saying is that $15,000 represents something far more valuable than any material purchase you could make with it. And understanding this difference is what separates people who build generational wealth from people who spend their entire lives wondering why they can't catch a break. Let's talk about what $15,000 actually represents in practical terms, because the psychology behind this number is absolutely fascinating, and most people have no idea how powerful this milestone really is. When you have zero savings, every single day feels like you're walking on a financial tightrope without a safety net. You wake up with anxiety about whether your car is going to start, whether your paycheck will clear before your rent is due, whether you can afford to get sick, whether that weird noise your refrigerator is making means you're about to lose all your food.
This isn't just stress. It's a constant state of low-level panic that affects every single decision you make. But something remarkable happens when you hit $15,000 in savings. Suddenly, you've got approximately 3 to 6 months of living expenses sitting in your account, depending on your lifestyle and where you live. This means that for the first time in your adult life, you're not one emergency away from complete financial disaster. Your car could break down tomorrow, and instead of having a panic attack, you'd be mildly annoyed.
You could get laid off, and instead of immediately going into survival mode, you'd have time to actually find a job you want, instead of desperately taking whatever comes along first. This psychological shift is absolutely massive, and most people don't realize it until they experience it. Research from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau shows that people with emergency funds of 3 to 6 months report significantly lower stress levels, better sleep quality, and improved overall health compared to those without savings. We're not talking about vague feelings here. We're talking about measurable physiological changes in your body's stress response. But here's where things get really interesting, and this is the part that will probably surprise you. The moment you hit $15,000 is also when your brain starts playing tricks on you in ways that can completely destroy your financial progress. Psychologists call this phenomenon mental accounting, and it's one of the primary reasons why most people never break through to real wealth, despite earning decent incomes. Here's how it works. When you have $500 in your account, spending $100 feels significant because you're burning through 20% of your total savings.
Your brain correctly identifies this as a meaningful expense that requires careful consideration. But when you have $15,000 saved up, spending $500 doesn't feel like much at all. It's only about 3% of your total, which seems negligible. So you start making these $500 decisions more casually. Maybe you upgrade your phone even though your current one works fine. Perhaps you buy those concert tickets without really thinking about it. You treat yourself to a nice dinner because, hey, you can afford it now.
And here's the insidious part. None of these individual decisions seem irrational in the moment. You've worked hard, you've saved diligently, and you deserve to enjoy your money, right? The problem is that these small erosions add up faster than you realize, and before you know it, 6 months have passed and your $15,000 has somehow shrunk to $12,000, then $10,000. Then you're back down to $8,000 and wondering what the hell happened. This is why $15,000 is so dangerous. It's large enough to make you feel secure, but not large enough to actually provide long-term financial independence.
It's the sweet spot where your discipline starts to crack because you finally feel like you've made it, even though you're nowhere near actual financial freedom. It's like thinking you've won a marathon when you've only run the first mile. You've accomplished something real and meaningful, but the race is far from over. Let me tell you about what I call the $15,000 trap, because this is where I see people get stuck more than any other financial milestone. You work your ass off for years to save up this money.
You skip vacations, you drive the same old car, you eat lunch at home while your coworkers go out to restaurants, you say no to things you want because you're focused on this goal. And then you finally hit it. You've got $15,000 in your account and it feels incredible. For the first time in your adult life, you're not worried about unexpected expenses. You can breathe. And that's exactly when the lifestyle inflation monster shows up and whispers in your ear. You've been so responsible for so long, it says. Don't you think you deserve to enjoy life a little?
You're not going to be young forever. What's the point of having money if you never spend it? This voice sounds completely reasonable, and honestly, it's not entirely wrong. The problem is that it's convincing you to make decisions that feel good in the short term but absolutely destroy your long-term wealth-building potential. Here's a real example that I see play out constantly. Someone saves up $15,000 over the course of 3 or 4 years through genuine sacrifice and discipline. They've been driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic that runs perfectly fine, but doesn't look particularly impressive.
Then one day they're scrolling through social media and they see everyone else posting pictures of their newer cars, their nice vacations, their upgraded apartments. And suddenly that voice gets louder. You've got $15,000 sitting there doing nothing. You could put $8,000 down on a nicer car and finally stop feeling embarrassed about what you drive. And here's the thing that makes this trap so effective. That decision isn't completely irrational. A newer car might be more reliable, might have better safety features, might actually make sense from a practical standpoint. But what most people don't calculate is the true cost of that decision. That $8,000 down payment isn't just $8,000. It's $8,000 that could have been invested and grown to $25,000 or more over the next decade. Plus, now you've got a car payment of $400 per month. That's another $4,800 per year that's not going toward building wealth. Higher insurance costs, probably another $600 per year. Over the course of 10 years, that decision to upgrade your car doesn't cost $8,000. It costs you something closer to $80,000 in lost wealth-building opportunity. And this is the pattern that keeps people trapped in the middle class forever. They make what seem like reasonable decisions. They buy things they can technically afford, but they never stop to calculate what those purchases are actually costing them in terms of their financial future. The person who can't see beyond the immediate gratification will spend their entire life working. The person who understands opportunity cost will eventually stop working because their money works for them instead.
Now, let me show you what $15,000 can actually become if you resist the temptation to blow it on lifestyle upgrades. Because this is where the mathematics get really exciting, and most people have absolutely no idea how powerful this amount of money can be if you just leave it alone and keep adding to it. Let's say you've got your $15,000 saved up, and instead of spending it, you decide to invest it in a simple index fund. Not some complicated investment strategy, not cryptocurrency, not individual stocks. Just a basic S&P 500 index fund that historically returns about 10% annually.
At a 10% annual return, your $15,000 becomes about $38,000 in 10 years without you adding another penny. Not bad, but not life-changing either. But here's where it gets interesting. If you continue adding just $500 per month to that investment, which is roughly what most people spend on car payments and insurance for a newer vehicle, something remarkable happens. After 10 years, you're not looking at $38,000, you're looking at over $115,000. After 20 years, you're sitting on more than $400,000. After 30 years, you've got $1.2 million. Same person, same income, same effort. The only difference is whether they understood the power of compound interest or whether they got seduced by the lifestyle inflation monster at that critical $15,000 moment. And here's something that will blow your mind. That $1 million isn't even the best part. The best part is what happens to your psychology along the way. When you have $15,000 and you're watching it grow, something shifts in your brain. You stop seeing money as something to spend and start seeing it as something that works for you.
Every month, you check your account and see that your investments generated more money than you contributed. In the beginning, this might only be $100 or $200, but as your balance grows, these gains become substantial. Eventually, you reach a point where your investments are generating more income than most people earn at their actual jobs. This is the moment when you truly understand the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich people have high incomes. Wealthy people have assets that generate income without them having to work. And $15,000 is the exact amount where most people make the choice between these two paths, usually without even realizing they're making a choice at all. But let's get real about something that nobody wants to talk about. Saving $15,000 in the first place is not easy. It requires genuine sacrifice, discipline, and often several years of going without things that other people take for granted. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that everyone can just magically save $15,000 if they stop buying lattes or cancel their Netflix subscription.
The reality is that most people are living paycheck to paycheck not because they're financially irresponsible, but because wages haven't kept up with the cost of living, because housing has become ridiculously expensive, because one medical emergency can wipe out years of savings. But here's what I've noticed after studying thousands of people's financial situations. The ones who build wealth aren't necessarily the ones making the most money. They're the ones who figure out how to consistently save something, even if it's small, and then they protect that savings like it's the most valuable thing they own. Because here's the secret that wealthy people understand and broke people don't. Your first $15,000 is infinitely more valuable than your second $15,000. Not because of the dollar amount, but because of what it teaches you about delayed gratification, discipline, and compound interest. The person who successfully saves their first $15,000 has developed the habits and mindset that will eventually make them wealthy. The person who can't get past $5,000 without spending it on something they don't need will probably never build significant wealth regardless of how much they earn.
This is why I get so frustrated when I see people finally hit $15,000 and then immediately blow it on a vacation or a car or some other depreciating asset.
They've done the hard part. They've built the foundation. They've proven to themselves that they can delay gratification and accumulate wealth. And then they throw it all away because they don't understand that they're not 1/10 of the way to financial freedom. They're actually much closer than they think. Let me explain why this is true using some simple mathematics that will change how you think about wealth building forever. If you invest $15,000 and never add another dollar, but you let it grow at 10% annually, it takes about 15 years to reach $60,000. So you'd think you're 1/4 of the way to your first $250,000, right? Wrong. Because of compound interest, that $60,000 only takes another 15 years to become $240,000. You're not 1/4 of the way there. You're actually more like halfway there in terms of time, even though the dollar amounts don't reflect it yet. This is the magic of exponential growth that most people never experience because they can't resist spending their seed capital. And here's something else that happens when you have $15,000 invested and you're watching it grow. Your relationship with risk completely transforms. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, every decision feels dangerous. Taking a new job, asking for a raise, starting a side business, all of these things feel impossibly risky because you have no cushion. But when you have $15,000 plus whatever it's grown to in your investment account, suddenly these same opportunities don't feel risky at all. They feel like calculated bets that you can afford to take. This is where having money makes making money so much easier. It's not about buying fancy investment products or getting access to exclusive opportunities. It's about having the financial security to take the kinds of risks that can dramatically increase your income. The person with no savings has to take whatever job offers them. The person with $15,000 saved can negotiate, can hold out for better opportunities, can afford to bet on themselves. And these decisions compound over time, just like investment returns do.
Think about it this way. If having $15,000 saved gives you the confidence to ask for a $5,000 raise and you successfully get it, you've just increased your annual income by $5,000. That's a 33% return on your investment in just 1 year, and it's a return that keeps paying you every single year going forward. Compare that to the person who spent their $15,000 on a car upgrade. They got a temporarily nicer vehicle, but they're still stuck in the same job making the same money because they can't afford to take any risks. Now, I know some of you are thinking, Rick, this all sounds great in theory, but what about emergencies? What if I save up $15,000 and then my car dies, or I lose my job, or I have a medical crisis? This is actually a perfect example of how most people completely misunderstand the purpose of emergency funds. Your $15,000 isn't supposed to sit in a checking account earning nothing forever. It's supposed to be deployed strategically to build wealth while still protecting you from disasters. Here's how this actually works in practice. You keep maybe $3,000 to $5,000 in a high-yield savings account for true emergencies. This is your "my car exploded" money, or your "I need to fly home for a family emergency" money. The rest goes into investments that are relatively accessible but that are actually growing. If a real emergency happens, you can access this money within a few days. But in the meantime, it's working for you instead of slowly losing value to inflation in a savings account earning 0.5% interest. This strategy gives you both security and growth. But most people never think about money this way. They think it's either all safety or all risk, when the smart approach is actually a combination of both. But here's where we need to have a really honest conversation about something that makes most personal finance experts uncomfortable. If you're earning minimum wage or close to it, saving $15,000 might feel completely impossible. And I'm not going to insult your intelligence by suggesting that you can get there just by skipping Starbucks or cooking at home more often. Those tips might help someone earning $50,000 a year save an extra $1,000, but they're not going to transform your financial life if you're struggling to pay rent.
So let's talk about what actually works. If you're currently earning less than $30,000 per year, your primary focus shouldn't be on saving money. It should be on increasing your earning potential.
This might mean learning a new skill, getting a certification, switching industries, starting a side business, or even moving to an area with better job opportunities. I know this sounds like generic advice, but it's true. You can't cut your way to wealth when you're barely covering basic expenses. You have to increase your income first, and then you can start saving aggressively. But here's what's interesting. The habits you build while earning less money will determine what you do when you eventually earn more. If you train yourself to spend every dollar you make when you're earning $30,000, you'll probably do the same thing when you're earning $60,000. But if you develop the discipline to save even $50 or $100 per month when money is tight, that same discipline will help you save $500 or $1,000 per month when your income increases. This is why starting with whatever you can afford matters more than the actual dollar amount.
The person who never develops the saving habit will stay broke forever, regardless of income. The person who saves something, even if it's small, is developing the most valuable financial skill they'll ever learn. Now let's talk about something that happens around the $15,000 mark that most people never anticipate. You start to notice opportunities that were invisible to you before. Maybe you hear about a friend who's starting a business and looking for small investors. Maybe you see a real estate deal that could be profitable. Maybe you learn about a certification program that costs $2,000 but could increase your salary by $10,000. When you're broke, you can't act on any of these opportunities no matter how good they are. You just have to watch other people take advantage of them while you're stuck on the sidelines. But when you have $15,000 available, suddenly you have options. This is what wealthy people mean when they say it takes money to make money. They're not talking about some conspiracy where the rich get richer. They're talking about the practical reality that opportunities require capital to pursue. And most of the best opportunities aren't available to people with zero savings.
And here's something that will probably make you uncomfortable, but it needs to be said. Your friends and family might actually try to sabotage your progress when you're getting close to $15,000. Not because they're bad people, but because your financial success makes them uncomfortable about their own choices. They might suggest expensive group vacations you can't afford. They might make comments about how you've changed or how you're being cheap. They might try to pressure you into spending money on things they want to do. This is one of the most challenging aspects of building wealth that nobody talks about. Your social circle has an enormous influence on your financial decisions. And if everyone around you is broke and spending money they don't have, it becomes incredibly difficult to make different choices. You'll feel like an outsider. You'll worry about being excluded. You'll question whether having money is worth losing relationships. This is why so many people who grow up in poverty stay in poverty, even when they increase their income. They're surrounded by people who reinforce broke thinking patterns. Breaking free from this pattern requires making some uncomfortable decisions about who you spend time with and what activities you participate in. I'm not saying you need to abandon your friends and family, but I am saying that you might need to start saying no to expensive activities and finding lower-cost ways to maintain those relationships. The people who truly care about you will understand. The people who don't probably weren't that great for you anyway. And here's what's fascinating. Once you successfully save $15,000 and protect it from lifestyle inflation, the next $15,000 comes much faster. This isn't just because of compound interest, although that certainly helps. It's because you've now proven to yourself that you can do it. You've built the neural pathways in your brain that make delayed gratification feel normal instead of painful. You've developed systems for tracking your spending and automating your savings. You've learned to distinguish between needs and wants. All of these skills transfer directly to building your second $15,000, which is why that one typically takes half the time of your first.
And here's where the mathematics get really exciting. Your third $15,000 comes even faster than your second. Your fourth faster than your third. By the time you're working on your 10th $15,000, you're basically just coasting on momentum while compound interest does most of the heavy lifting for you. This is the exponential growth pattern that most people never experience because they cash out too early. They hit $15,000, they spend it on something that depreciates, and they never get to see what happens when you actually let wealth compound over time. Let me give you a reality check about what $15,000 in savings actually means in the broader context of American wealth. According to the Federal Reserve, approximately 40% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing money or selling something. That means if you have $15,000 saved, you're already doing better than almost half the population. Now, that statistic should probably make you angry because it reveals just how financially fragile most people are. But it should also be encouraging if you've managed to save this amount because it proves you're capable of something that most people never achieve. But here's the thing. Being better than 40% of Americans is not the goal. The goal is financial independence, which for most people means having enough passive income from investments to cover their basic living expenses without having to work. And that requires significantly more than $15,000. But $15,000 is the foundation. It's the seed capital that can eventually grow into real wealth if you protect it and continue building on it. The question is whether you're going to treat it like a windfall to spend or like a foundation to build upon. Now let's address something that might be running through your mind right now. Rick, this all sounds great, but what if the stock market crashes right after I invest my $15,000? What if I save all this money and then lose half of it in a recession? This is a legitimate concern, and honestly, if you invest $15,000 today, there's a very real possibility that at some point in the next few years, your account balance will drop below $15,000, maybe significantly below. This is not a reason to avoid investing. It's a reason to understand how investing actually works.
Stock market corrections happen. Recessions happen. Your investment balance will go down sometimes, and it will feel terrible when it does. But here's what history teaches us. Every single stock market crash in American history has eventually been followed by a recovery that brought the market to new highs. Every single one. The people who lost money permanently were the ones who panicked and sold at the bottom. The people who built wealth were the ones who either held on or, even better, kept investing through the downturn. Think about it this way. If you invest $15,000 today and the market drops 30% next year, your balance will temporarily be around $10,500. That feels awful, no question. But if you don't panic and you keep adding money to your investments, you're buying shares at a 30% discount. When the market recovers, and it will, those discounted shares will be worth significantly more. This is how people who understand investing think. They don't see market crashes as disasters. They see them as sales on shares of great companies. But I get it. This mindset is easy to have in theory and incredibly difficult to maintain when you're actually watching your account balance drop. This is why the most important thing you can do when you hit $15,000 is to automate everything. Set up automatic transfers to your investment account. Set up automatic investments in index funds. Remove your ability to make emotional decisions during market volatility. The less you think about your investments on a day-to-day basis, the better you'll probably do. Because here's the brutal truth. Most people are their own worst enemy when it comes to investing. They buy when they're feeling optimistic, which usually means prices are high. They sell when they're feeling scared, which usually means prices are low. This is the exact opposite of what successful investors do. And it's why the average investor historically earns returns that are several percentage points lower than the market average. They're not buying bad investments. They're just buying and selling at the wrong times, based on emotions.
So if you've saved $15,000, congratulations. You've accomplished something that most Americans never do. You've proven you have the discipline to delay gratification and build a financial foundation. But now comes the really important part. What you do with that $15,000 over the next few years will probably have a bigger impact on your financial future than any other money decision you'll ever make. Will you blow it on lifestyle upgrades that depreciate, or will you protect it, invest it, and continue building on it until compound interest takes over and starts doing the heavy lifting for you? The choice seems obvious when I lay it out like this, but in the moment, when you're tired of driving an old car,
When your friends are taking vacations you can't afford? When everyone around you seems to be enjoying their money while you're being boring and responsible, that choice becomes much harder. This is why understanding the psychology of wealth is just as important as understanding the mathematics. You need to know why you're making these sacrifices. You need to have a clear vision of what financial independence means for your life. And here's something that might help when you're feeling tempted to spend your $15,000 on something you don't really need. Calculate how much passive income that money could eventually generate. At a 7% withdrawal rate, which is aggressive but possible with a diversified portfolio, $15,000 could eventually provide you with about $10.50 per year in passive income, or roughly $87 per month. That doesn't sound like much, but that's just the starting point. If you let that money grow for 20 years without touching it, it becomes about $58,000, which generates roughly $4,000 per year in passive income, or $340 per month. That's a car payment. That's groceries. That's real money that shows up every month without you having to work for it. Now multiply that by all the other $15,000 increments you'll save over your lifetime. If you can save $15,000 every 3 years, which is roughly $400 per month, and you do this from age 25 to age 55, you'll have multiple streams of passive income all maturing at different times. By the time you're in your 50s, you could easily be generating $3,000 to $5,000 per month in passive income without touching your principal. That's the difference between having to work until you die and being able to retire comfortably in your 50s or even earlier.
But this only works if you protect that first $15,000 and all the ones that come after it. This only works if you resist the temptation to convert your growing wealth into depreciating assets. This only works if you can see beyond the immediate gratification and keep your eyes on the long-term goal. And I'm not going to lie to you, this is hard. It's probably one of the hardest things you'll ever do because it requires you to live differently from almost everyone around you for decades. You'll watch your friends buy new cars while you drive something that's paid off. You'll see your coworkers go on expensive vacations while you take cheaper trips or skip them entirely. You'll feel left out when everyone's upgrading their lifestyle and you're maintaining the same modest standard of living you had when you earned less. But here's what they won't tell you. Most of those people are one emergency away from financial disaster. Most of them are stressed about money even though they don't show it. Most of them will be working into their 70s because they never built any passive income streams. You, on the other hand, will have options they can't even imagine. You'll be able to retire early if you want. You'll be able to take a sabbatical to travel or pursue a passion project. You'll be able to help your kids with college without taking on debt. You'll be able to handle any financial emergency without panic. This is the real purpose of wealth. Not to show off or impress people, but to buy yourself freedom and options in life. So here's my challenge to you. If you haven't saved $15,000 yet, make that your absolute priority for the next 12 to 36 months, depending on your income. Cut expenses aggressively. Find ways to increase your income. Sell things you don't need. Do whatever it takes to hit this milestone because it's the foundation for everything else. And if you've already hit $15,000, your job is to protect it like it's the most valuable thing you own. Because honestly, it probably is. Don't let the lifestyle inflation monster convince you that you deserve to blow this money on things that won't matter in 5 years. Don't let social pressure push you into spending decisions that will keep you broke forever. Don't let your own impatience rob you of the compound interest that will eventually set you free. The next few years of your financial life will determine the next few decades. Choose wisely. Your future self is counting on the decisions you make right now. Remember, $15,000 isn't the finish line. It's the starting line. It's proof that you can do this. It's the foundation that will support a lifetime of wealth building if you let it. Most people will never understand what you're doing or why you're doing it. But when you're 50 years old and you have the freedom to work because you want to, not because you have to, you'll look back on this decision to protect and invest your first $15,000 as the moment everything changed. The mathematics doesn't lie, even if it requires more patience than our instant gratification culture typically appreciates. Start protecting your $15,000 today because 20 years from now, you'll either be thanking yourself or wondering what could have been. And trust me, you want to be the person looking back with gratitude, not regret.